Welcome to Assessing Literacy Development, an Overview. In terms of the language students bring to school, their fluency in reading, the amount of reading they do, and their ability to use reading to understand, children in the U.S. differ more than you may realize. During the mini lectures for this course, you will have some anticipation guides. An anticipation guide is a strategy that activates prior knowledge and helps students to think about their thoughts and perceptions of concepts and interact more fully with the concepts being studied. It is designed to probe your attitudes and beliefs about important and sometimes controversial topics. There are often no right or wrong answers. The statements will alert you to your attitudes about the concept and encourage you to become aware of areas where you might require additional information. After reading a chapter or listening to the mini-lecture, you might respond to the anticipation guide again to see if your answers have changed in light of what you have learned. For each of the above statements, put a check under agree or disagree to show how you feel. Be prepared to discuss your responses with classmates. If you haven't already, print off the mini-lecture notes that goes with this mini-lecture. Pause the clip now to print and complete the anticipation guide. To understand how to accurately assess language development, we must first know about the literacy development of the average student. Since some of you will be kindergarten and first grade teachers, we must start before the student ever enters school. Studies have shown that the average adult's likelihood of having a job, earning a good income, staying out of jail, and participating in civic affairs marches in close step with his or her reading ability. This ability starts in preschool. Children from English-speaking professional families had 3 times as many words addressed to them as children from English-speaking receiving welfare. The result is that some children in first grade have at least twice as many words in their vocabularies as other children, which directly affects all content area learning, not just reading. The language experience children have in preschool sets the stage for their school years. When you get your students in kindergarten and first grade, they already have different reading abilities. Those below grade level need instruction they should have gotten before coming to kindergarten. Besides language exposure, students differ tremendously in the amount of reading they do. One study found that 20% of 5th grade students who read the most read 50 times as much as the 20% who read the least. The data from this study is shown here. Pause the clip if you wish to study the results. The point is that far too many students don't read as well as we would like them to. And not only that, but this is an example of the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect basically says that the rich get richer and the poor gets poorer. So in reading, those who read get better, and those who don't read become further and further behind their peers. Before we get into the specifics of reading assessment at the different grade levels, let's talk about reading assessment in general. What is reading assessment? Here are 5 definitions of assessment. While all authors define the word assessment differently, they are all explaining the same thing and are all correct. APA-style references for these 4 books are on the last slide of this mini-lecture. Gillett et al. Define assessment in reading as gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information to tell how well a student reads. Gunning says that it is the process of gathering data about an area of learning through tests, observation, work samples, and other means. Tompkins states it is an ongoing process to monitor growth, diagnose problems, and improve reading. Rowan Smith says it is the collection of data, such as test scores and informal records, to measure student achievement. Opitz and Erickson define assessment as asking questions about students' knowledge and skills and the process of getting answers. Many of these authors do not interchange assessment with evaluation. They are 2 different concepts. Evaluation is defined as follows. Evaluation is used at the end of instruction to make judgments and determine quality against a set of standards. Evaluation is the process of using the results of tests, observation, work samples, and other devices to judge the effectiveness of a program. A program is evaluated in terms of its objectives. The ultimate purpose of evaluation is to improve the program. Evaluation is interpreting evidence. To those who separate assessment and evaluation, assessment is gathering the data and evaluation is using the data to make improvements. A diagnostic approach to assessing and teaching reading is a comprehensive way of using data that is gathered by examining 3 primary components of effective reading instruction: learner, instruction, and context. Diagnostics are necessary problem-solving tools for looking into any complicated system. Monitoring the inner workings of a system helps people to notice when something goes wrong, to keep it in good working order, and to figure out how to improve the system. Reading is one such complex system. Reading diagnostics is about knowing readers. The word diagnosis is frowned on by many educators for one reason or another, but when the original Greek meaning, to come to know, is emphasized, it is a useful term to discuss how to identify students' reading strengths and needs. Diagnosis is supported by the 10 principles set forth by the position statement, Excellent Reading Teachers, of the Board of Directors of the International Reading Association. I encourage you to search the web to find and read this position statement. Identifying readers' strengths is a good first step in accelerating readers' growth. Students are always showing what they know and need to know. Beginning with strengths is anything but pretending that students know everything and just need to be encouraged. Instead, if you look for strengths first, you see the child as the one who can bring something to the new learning to help make the new learning easier and more meaningful. One of your assignments for this course will be to assess the strengths of one student. Identifying needs is an important part of a diagnostic approach. As already stated, students are always showing what they know and need to know. Part of helping students to move forward is acknowledging their needs and designing appropriate instruction to address those needs. This entire course is about identifying the needs of a student and planning appropriate instruction to address those needs. You may or may not be able to implement these plans. Finally, zooming in and out is essential. Zooming in means spending time getting to know just one learner very well and learning to teach based on this knowledge. You will be working one-on-one and assessing just one learner and zooming into his or her strengths, weaknesses, and attitudes. Zooming out means figuring out how to scale the management of information and planning for groups and whole classes. Zooming out involves generalizing your understandings based on one student to wider audiences such as the classroom. Now that we have defined assessment, let's talk about the purposes for assessment. There are different purposes for assessment and different audiences for the information that assessment brings to light. These purposes are to guide instruction, to monitor success of instructional approaches, to give feedback to children and their parents, to make decisions on placement of children in special instructional services, to make sure all students are meeting state standards for learning, and ourselves as teachers or teachers-to-be. When we assess to guide instruction, we assess to determine students' reading levels so we can provide them with materials at the right level. We also assess to locate students' strengths and areas of need to aim our instruction. Finally, we assess to identify students' literacy strategies so we can strengthen them. For example, if you were going to bake some cupcakes and only had a measuring spoon, making the cupcakes would be difficult because you don't have all the tools needed. Reading strategies are the tools used in reading. Approaches vary in their success with individual students or with whole classrooms of students. When we assess to monitor instructional approaches, we assess to find out if a teaching approach or set of materials is working for a student. We also find out what strategies seem best to whole groups of students. Research has shown that schools that are most effective in helping all students learn to read and write are those in which teachers monitor how well instruction is working and use this information as they work with other teachers to find ways to improve instruction. Findings from assessment should be communicated to students and their parents so both can work toward the student's success. We assess to show students what they are doing well and what they can do better, to help students set goals for better performance and to monitor their progress toward meeting those goals, and to help parents understand how students are performing in learning to read and to determine what parents can do to help. One caveat: not all parents can read well themselves. We assess to make decisions on the placement of students in special instructional services. All students in the U.S. are entitled by law to special education services if they need them, and they are also entitled to special support to learn the English language if necessary. Parents may request that their children be screened for such services, but teachers may also identify students who need more support than what is likely to be available to them in the regular classroom. Either way, special screening is called for, including specialized tests that are normally administered by school psychologists. But the teacher's own observational records and assessment results also play a useful role in these decisions. We assess to make sure all students are meeting state standards for learning. The federal No Child Left Behind Act, passed in 2002, mandated that every child in the U.S. be tested in reading from grades 3 through 8. The tests are developed by the individual states. Core standards for reading and writing achievement are available at the national level. Some states have adopted these common core standards. You will need to make yourself aware of whether your state has adopted these standards or not. Because the tests mandated by law have considerable consequences, many teachers are using more frequent assessments given throughout the year that show their students' progress towards meeting the standards on which their state tests are based. The individual state standards are usually found on the state's Department of Education website. We assess ourselves as teachers or as teachers-to-be in order to make sure our professional knowledge is up to date and that our practices are serving our students as best they can. We assess our professional knowledge both in order to keep ourselves up to date and to meet teaching licensing requirements. In the state of Indiana, where I am a licensed teacher, there are certain things I have to accomplish every 5 years to have my license renewed. You will need to find out what is expected of you in the state where you plan to teach. What are the steps of assessment? Classroom assessment drives instruction, ensures that students are making adequate progress, determines the effectiveness of instruction, and assesses students' achievement. Assessment involves 4 steps: planning, monitoring, evaluating, and reflecting. Each step serves a different purpose, so teachers need to integrate all of the steps in their classroom assessment. Teachers plan for assessment at the same time they're planning for instruction. They think about these questions and choose the assessment tool they'll use to get answers. Do students have adequate background knowledge and vocabulary about the topic to be taught? Are any students struggling to understand? Are students completing assignments? Are students exhibiting good work habits? Are students working responsibly with classmates? Have students learned the concepts that have been taught? Can students apply what they're learning in authentic literacy projects? By planning for assessment before they begin teaching, teachers are prepared to use assessment tools wisely. Otherwise, classroom assessment often turns out to be haphazard and impromptu. Monitoring is vital to student success. Teachers monitor students' learning every day and use the results to make instructional decisions. As they monitor students' progress, teachers learn about students and their individual strengths and weaknesses and about the impact of their instruction. Teachers use observations, conferences, and other informal, formative procedures to monitor students' progress. Effective teachers are kid watchers, a term Goodman coined to describe the direct and informal observation of students. To be effective kid watchers, teachers must focus on what students do as they read, not on whether they're behaving properly or working quietly. Of course, little learning can occur in disruptive situations, but during these observations, the focus is on literacy, not behavior. Observations should be planned. Teachers usually observe a specific group of students each day so that over the course of a week, they watch everyone in the class. Teachers write brief notes in notebooks or on self-stick notes as they observe students. The most useful notes describe specific events, report rather than evaluate, and relate the events to other information about the student. To quote Sherlock Holmes, anecdotal notes are just the facts, ma'am. Teachers make notes about students' reading activities, the questions students ask, and the strategies and skills they use fluently and those they don't understand. These records monitor and document students' growth and pinpoint problem areas to address in future mini-lessons. In another class, you will learn about literature circles. The chart here has an example of a teacher's anecdotal notes for a literature circle on Bunnicula. Pause this clip and take a moment to read through her notes. Teachers talk with students to monitor their progress as well as to set goals and help them solve problems. There are 6 types of conferences. On-the-spot conferences involve the teacher visiting with students at their desk for a minute or less to monitor some aspect of the student's work or to check on progress. Planning conferences involve the teacher and the student making plans for reading or writing. Revising conferences are when a small group of students meet with the teacher to share their rough drafts and get specific suggestions about how to revise them. Book discussion conferences are when students meet with the teacher to discuss the book they've read. They may share reading log entries, discuss plot or characters, or compare the story to others they've read. Editing conferences involves the teacher reviewing students' proofread compositions and helping them correct spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and other mechanical errors. In evaluating conferences, the teacher meets with students after they've completed an assignment or project to talk about their growth as readers and writers. Students reflect on their accomplishments and set goals. Checklists simplify assessment and enhance students' learning. Teachers identify the evaluation criteria in advance so students understand what's expected of them before they begin working. Students can also use the checklist to evaluate their own work. For more information on observation, anecdotal notes, and checklists, watch the Monitoring Students' Progress mini-lecture. Teachers document students' learning to make judgments about their achievement. At this stage, the assessment is summative. Tests are a traditional way to evaluate students' learning, but most teachers prefer to evaluate students' actual reading and writing to make judgments about their achievement. Teachers use work samples, rubrics, and multimodal assessments to evaluate students' learning. Shown on this slide are 4 online resources for writing rubrics. Teachers reflect on their instruction to improve their teaching effectiveness. They ask themselves questions about lessons that were successful and those that weren't, and how they might adapt instruction to meet their students' needs. They also analyze students' achievement, because teachers aren't effective if students aren't learning. Researchers recommend that teachers work with colleagues who can help to solve problems and improve instruction. Appropriate instruction stems from and is interwoven with accurate and pertinent diagnostic information for all learners. 4 steps can be used when designing such instruction. These steps can be seen as a pattern in that they are continually used to assess and teach reading. First, be mindful of factors beyond the learner. Ask yourself 3 questions to ascertain students' reading. Select and use tools to assess the students. Finally, determine how you will use what you have discovered. Future mini-lectures will help you with understanding these points.